Hello everyone, SirMonkeySuit or Zappy here, back again with Mob Psycho 100 Season 2, and we have finally made it to the finale after like a year. We're finally here. It took a long hiatus as well as TPN. By the way, The Promised Neverland will continue after this episode. After I've finished obviously Mob Psycho 100, then like Season 2, which will be after this episode, then I'm going straight on to The Promised Neverland to finish that up, and then we'll get on to some new series. But we finally made it, and yeah. Mob versus Suzuki. Mob versus the leader of Claw at the end of Season 2. I wasn't expecting this at all. I mean, after Season 1, we were only up against the 7th Division. Now, normally you would expect that you would go through like other divisions to get to, the leader of Claw, like eventually in like seasons to come. But we're getting to it in this episode. Now, depending on how it goes, I don't know. But I've trusted Mob up until this point. I have no reason to believe otherwise, other than the fact that Suzuki is clearly like the hardest opponent he's ever come up against. Clearly, of course, Mob at 100% right now apparently is sort of somewhat equal to Suzuki's 10% output, somewhere in that regard. But we've seen Mob go past that before when he gave it to Reagan. So, we've seen him go up to 1,000%, which, I said this in the post-discussion for last episode, but the math kind of adds up that, Suzuki's not going to be able to output anything past 100%. I feel like that's just how it works out kind of logically, but Mob has been up to 1,000%. Now that means that they're equal if you get them to that point. And I guess there's nothing to say that if Mob can't go to 1,000%, there's nothing stopping him from going beyond that. Whether that happens or not, I don't know. But he's in the middle of Rage right now, and he's 100%. He's also floating the fucking tower up above, which is to get other people out of the blast zone. How does he keep that up? Because he's going to have to be focused on floating that thing whilst he's fighting Suzuki. I just don't know how the fuck it's going to happen. I don't know, man. But yeah, the fucking last episode was great. It was great, like, just seeing that turn in Mob where it was just like, you know what, screw it. Sometimes you just got to fucking, you know what I mean, get a beating and learn the hard way. That was great. So yeah, I don't think there's anything else to really talk about. If you do want to go watch the reaction, you can do in the link below. You can also go watch the full length, which will be completely unedited, and you can watch the full reaction to the whole episode by going over to my Patreon and becoming a full length tier access member over on my Patreon. Had a brain fart there. But yeah, there's nothing else to really talk about, so we're going to get in episode 13 and see what we get. So without further ado, let's go. Okay, episode 13, the finale for season 2, and I didn't even write down a whole lot. I kind of just almost like just took it as is, which is something I don't really usually do, to be fair. But I felt like almost everything was, especially within the fight, was pretty much self-contained and pretty self-explanatory. Kind of what was going on there. The idea that Mob did end up sort of empathizing with him. The reason why, because he was so powerful that he almost became completely like something else, and then essentially what Mob had like sort of figured out that like he just didn't fit in with everybody else, and therefore he ended up being alone and sort of in solitary, which Mob understands. Now, not for actually in a lot of ways it is actually almost exactly the same as Mob. Suzuki's sort of emotions, whilst I suppose they have said before that it is tied to like the sort of psychic power, like your sort of emotions and everything like that, they are tied to that. But the output of 10% from 20% to 50% and then 100% all did actually tie with that kind of the stress level and stuff, and bringing all of that out there, which so I think in a lot of ways it is actually very similar to Mob, that he kept his emotions sort of in check and almost locked away. Obviously, like for different reasons. Like, you know, obviously Suzuki wanted to, I assume at some point, like, to do the best that he could. And sort of over time, probably like subconsciously, because of that power or whatever, just kind of grew to understand this idea that because I'm like, I've got all this power, like I don't need to almost explain myself to anybody, and it just kind of shut off like all of his emotions. And when, you know, Mob was able to sort of bring that out, especially with the whole, you know, show's mother and everything like that, yeah, that was cool. I wasn't expecting him to actually bring Suzuki back. Like, I was almost certain that Suzuki was going to be that one character that Mogami was sort of hinting about. Ever since, you know, Mob was like, you know, people can change and I can bring them back, I was like, they're going to have, like, if there's any character that is going to sort of defy that logic, then it would have been Suzuki. And it turns out it wasn't. You know, he was able to bring him back. And I guess that, like, Reagan was right after all, what he said a couple episodes ago about, or last episode, about how, you know, Mob's psychic powers isn't like the only, like, you know, like the only abilities that he has, and one of the greatest powers that he has is he's able to just tell people how he feels, and that gets people, you know, way more than anything else. And he was right, because he got through to Suzuki. You know, obviously it helped that he was almost going to fucking sacrifice himself alongside him, you know what I mean? But in Mob's sort of just sheer, almost like just through sheer will and almost like desperation there, because I'm sure in the same way Mob was thinking, you know, like, I feel like he had the same thing with Serizawa the episode before, where he was empathizing, and he had that almost like that the friendship power thing, where he was able to feel everything that the other person was feeling. And, you know, Serizawa was able to see everything that happened to Mob and realize that Mob was the same as him. I wonder if that was the same thing there, except the opposite way, where Mob was actually seeing things that happened to Suzuki, and therefore sort of think about everything himself and with Tsubumi and everything like that, that maybe there was some like sort of like, right, I'm gonna fucking get us both out of this, because I know, like, you know, you in regards to your wife, and then and Sho's mother and everything. And yeah, I mean, fucking hell, man. I'm surprised he came out relatively unscathed. You know, considering what the fuck, like, what happened there. But, you know, I guess all of that energy there was actually transferred into the broccoli seeds, and therefore that's the reason why it's so fucking huge, which is probably why they got away unscathed, was all that energy was transferred. Like, so my understanding of it was that Mob, he said that I'm going to absorb it all, and because he had the broccoli seeds there, although he forgot about them, like, all of that energy that he was absorbing was going into all of the broccoli seeds and just sprouting the whole fucking thing. It's so ridiculous, man. Fuck's sake. I was like, why did I even bother bringing it up? Because now it's like cringy and cheesy. But like, there was a hole there. Like, that's where your heart is, on the left side. I was like, well, it's probably that. You know what I mean? You opened his heart to Suzuki, and that's the reason why that was there. Nah, it was the broccoli seeds. So, fuck's sake, man. But yeah, man. So, really, really, really cool. Again, this show, like, the visuals are on point. I'm not just talking about, like, because, I mean, yes, right, it is Studio Bones, and Studio Bones are, like, they're up there in terms of, I think, like, not just like straight animation, but I feel like there's a lot to say about, like, their visual style, in that it also tells a story. It's not just visuals for the sake of being visuals. Like, you know, it's almost like, I don't, the only way to describe it is camera work, but it sounds so weird saying camera work because it's not being made through a camera. But generally, when in terms of animation, when you're drawn frame by frame, you are almost drawn it like you are acting out a scene that you would like live action if you had a camera. Like you're framing the camera, where your camera is just like your sheet of paper, or your screen in which you are you're drawn upon. So it's the camera work really that really impresses me about specifically this show, because they frame it in such a way that tells the story. Like it was most apparent in episode 13 with the fight against Shimazaki. Is that his name? The guy who can teleport, where they would have it in first person, so that it would be like, if you were like, it basically put you in the shoes of that one dude, the one with the fucking sword, but he also has the gun, right? And he was aiming, trying to keep tabs on where Shimazaki was, only to find out that he was right behind you the whole time. And it's just great, like stuff like that. And also obviously teleporting Teruki like different to different locations and stuff. Like it's just so creative. So yeah, I mean, just absolutely fantastic the way they do this show. And it's not typical. Like every fight, Mob finds meaning in the reason why they have to fight. Like he doesn't fight for the sake of fighting. He fights to bring out the best in people, as opposed to knock them down. Like it's so like it's different to any other show I've ever seen, and I really fucking love this show. Now I think I have heard in the grapevine that there is, when it comes to Mob Psycho, it's almost like a pretty contained story, and I think that they pretty much have next season and that's it, and I think that's all of it, which is a bit like it's it's sad in a way, but I feel like the Mob Psycho is in like a world isn't about the world building. Like it's not about why people have psychic powers and stuff, unless they really get into that like next season, sorry. But generally it's been a more contained story and a more sort of like Mob, by being this one specifically that on purpose, like he is that one character that doesn't have any emotions and therefore is alone, and his ever growing list of friends and people that he cares about and people that he's changed, like changing almost the world at one step at a time. And like a lot of the episodes, like I've said before in the past, are very self-contained in themselves. Like they don't necessarily drive the story forward. They affect characters in certain ways that end up coming back later, specifically the likes of Mob. But I feel like the story almost as a whole is very self-contained, so it's not one of those that has to go. It doesn't have to be very long. I mean, the seasons are only 12 and 13 episodes respectively. So, and I feel like the last season will probably be the same. But it's fine with it being self-contained. And Serizawa working there now, I love that. That's great. That's perfect. He does look very different with that hair. He really does. But yeah, so yeah, Suzuki's going to become a research subject, which I mean, yeah, could have got like executed, but it seems like Suzuki's just willing to take on the punishment anyway. And at least his wife or ex-wife or whatever is going to go see him again anyway, and whatnot. But yeah, I mean, that's pretty much all I got. It was wrapping up everything from like all of the main sort of build up in the story and the characters and everything like that was done like pretty much in the first half. Like the last few episodes and everything like that were kind of almost like wrapping up all of that story and everything that we'd done in like the first half and whatnot. Pretty much everything up until after Mogami, like that, like just like all of that stuff, like all that self-contained stuff there was like Mob very much like he was learning like all of these like different like sort of like ideals and motivation. Like why do I like why do we like treat like spirits and all of that like so differently and everything like that, and how when everything with the like Mogami and how people can change and everything like that. Like Mogami's a really big sort of entity in Mob's world, like a big pinnacle, like almost that changed something like, or basically give Mob like the biggest sort of like life positive advice that he could give them, which obviously the sort of juxtaposition of Mogami being something that is so negative, bringing out something so positive in Mob was like the whole point, and that obviously affecting everything in the end of this season, like just all of that kind of made sense. So yeah, I mean, in terms of like this episode as a whole, like it's not much to like really talk about. I feel like it was all self-explanatory, explanatory because it was the fallout of everything that had happened in the previous episodes. And I can't wait for the next season to come out. And I'm telling you now, like I'm going to make a note. Like next season, I'm not going to wait a year to do it. I'm doing it as it comes out. End of. That's how I'm doing it. Because I'm sure you guys would be happy to hear that as well. There's no excuse for taking a year to fucking get through 13 episodes, for Christ's sake, especially of a fucking show that I like as much as this one. So my apologies for that, and I hope you'll forgive me. But yeah, I mean, that's all I've got. So thank you everyone for watching. In the description below, I have links to certain things. One of them is the Discord, so you can get over there if you wish. And I also have a Patreon page as well, so if you do want to support me on Patreon, that'd be very much appreciated. There is a bunch of different tiers and rewards there that you can support me with, depending on how much you want to support me with. The early access tier, $5 a month, gives you access to shows a week early. Of course, with this being the end, I said at the beginning that I was continuing on with The Promised Neverland at this point. So when this goes out on YouTube for the general public, the next episode of TPN should be out. The next 2 episodes, actually. I think what I'll do is what episode am I at on TPN? Is it episode 6 or 7? It's one of those 2. Anyway, whatever the next episode is, I'll probably put out on YouTube straight away, alongside this episode. So you'll probably see it crop up in the next few hours or a couple hours or whatever the hell. And then the episode after that will be available on Patreon for early access. Okay, so go have a look at that. So yeah, that's early access, $5 a month. And there's also $10 there for full length. If you do want to watch any of these episodes in full, unedited, and not like the 10-minute cut version, you can watch the full thing. Then you can do by becoming a full length tier access member there. And there's also other tiers where you can pay to have a certain show reacted to as well. So if you want me to react to a show, go have a look at those tiers and see what they offer. But that is all I've got. So thank you for watching. I'll see you all next time. Bye bye.